We know that the IMF expects Liberia to grow by 7% this year. In the last year, the worst of the recession, Liberia was growing at 5%. Its output over $1.6 billion, so it's still modest. They're starting off a low base, but what do they need to do to really just get this economy on track after many years of war?
Yeah, there are a lot of issues that Johnson have to address, of which she has tried a lot to actually put in place some strategy in order to address the challenges that are facing the country after the 14-year civil war that started in that country, especially the cycle of coup and coup d'etat that came up after Samuel Doe in that country. We are aware that Liberia is the first modern nation in Africa because of the air slave that came from America and Caribbean to establish Liberia. Yeah. And some of these issues, you look at the issue of restructuring of the army, then you look at the infrastructure facility, then you look at the resources. Right. When you talk about the resources, you talk about the issue of the environment, the challenges facing the Liberian state. First and foremost, I think she has to put in place a policy that will be investment friendly, that will encourage investors to come into Liberia, because Liberia is just over 3 million people, and naturally it should be a potential middle income country in West Africa. But because of the civil war, we realize that most of the facilities are gone. We don't really have facility in place that will encourage investors to come into Liberia. So it is not the responsibility of Johnson to actually address the issue of responsibility. And this is one of the reasons he initiated poverty reduction policy and trying to bring out electricity and water into Liberia.
All right. Now, naturally, Liberia has mineral resources. It has fertile land, hence the thriving timber and rubber industry. And it also has the second largest maritime licensing register. So they've got the ocean, they've got the land, and they've got the minerals such as diamonds. What can Mrs. Sirleaf Johnson do to leverage those attributes? Yeah,
presently, you know, the external environment is beyond your control as a state. But the internal environment of which you can easily control. Because when you look at the prices of this product, it's beyond Johnson's control. But more or less, she should focus on internal environment. Bring about an environment that is friendly for investment rather than focusing on the external environment, because there is a sort of asymmetrical relation between the less developing country and the developed country, of which we also have effect on Liberia as one of the less developed countries. But now she should focus on the internal environment, how to build the internal environment, bringing about resources like water that she's trying to do, and the policy of poverty reduction that she's trying to do presently. Then empower the youth. Then how do you integrate the ex-combatant? How do you address the issue internally displaced people and look at issue of refugee? These are the issues you should focus on, living at the external environment, because the external environment is beyond our control.
Okay, now apparently the FDI to GDP ratio in Liberia is the highest in the world. Although about $97 million was brought into Liberia through new investments, they have to service a lot of international debt accumulated over years of war. And also because of the war, the infrastructure is dilapidated. No electricity pylons, no functioning water, potable water sites. The roads are in a bad shape. So anybody who's investing in Liberia is going to have to do a lot just to keep running, just to keep going, and the cost of business are too high.
Yeah, that is what she's trying to do, because the issue of the debt you just mentioned, Liberia accumulated over $3.4 billion because of the civil war that plagued the country for over 14 years. And more importantly now, that was why I was trying to emphasize that the focus should be on how to build the domestic environment, because once the domestic environment is in proper shape, it will encourage foreign direct investment into Liberia rather than focusing on the external environment or looking at the price itself. You are also aware that recently oil was discovered in Liberia, which is also a very critical issue that can also help the country itself. But more importantly, when you look at other countries in West African sub-region and other part of Africa that also have oil, I think Liberia should try and see what happened to other countries in Africa, because the issue of resource cost will also plague Liberia if they are not careful. And they also bring us to the issue of corruption now, because in a situation where they have the resources and the majority are not benefiting, it is more or less a resource cost.
Okay, the resource curse also has the the negative history of Liberia being the epicenter of the whole debate on conflict diamonds, because that's really where the illegal trade in diamonds was taking place. Now, UN sanctions have been lifted on the diamond and timber trades. What can they do to maximize the new opportunity that's before them?
I think they need to address the issue of corruption and also address the issue of the combatants I mentioned there. Because when you look at Liberia, we have almost 16 ethnic groups. And one of the causes of the civil war itself is the dominance of the state by the 5%, the Eastleigh from America, of which there should be a sort of equality and human right and rule of law in the state, in order for the state to maximize the profit from natural resources. Because when you look at other countries, look at Angola, look at Nigeria, look at Gabon, they are all experiencing resource costs, despite the fact that you have a peace. But Liberia should be able to learn from those countries that in order to maximize or benefit from your natural resource, to avoid the resource cost, there should be a rule of law and avoid corruption. And she was clever enough, and that was why he initiated Liberia anti-corruption law in 2008 in order to address all this issue of resource cost. So that majority of Liberia is a small country of over 3 million. And if it is properly placed, majority of the people will benefit from the resources. Okay,
her biggest social project is education. There's a huge weakness in the skills pool in Liberia, and obviously a legacy of the war. Because of the war, many schools were damaged, and also because of the high cost of newspapers during the war, people couldn't improve on their reading. So the literacy rate in Liberia is said to be over 70%, and the unemployment rate is also said to be somewhere in the region of 85%. So anybody who's coming into Liberia to do business is not just faced with an infrastructure problem, but is also faced with the fact that labor cannot function at optimum level because of very, very poor skills. How did they get around that?
It's going to take some time, because that was why she initiated a free primary education in order to address the issue of high illiteracy level in the country. And at the same time, I also assume that for any business to properly function in Liberia presently, given the situation of the country in the post-conflict period, it has to do with whatever the resources they have in place, because it will further generate a conflict between the indigenous people and the foreign expatriates that you are bringing into the country, which may further create a problem. Because presently, when you look at the wages, it's about $80. It was formerly $18 before she came into power, but currently it's about $80 per month. You can imagine what $80 can do for a household for a month. So it shows the level of things in Liberia, and you look at the level, the so-called job employment. When you talk about unemployment, which level are you trying to look at? Is it unskilled or skilled? Because when you look at it, 90% of so-called unemployment is unskilled.